Hey everyone, today let's look at some of the game's coolest yet least used perks. These perks all have unique and interesting effects, yet no one uses them, with some having pick rates as low as 0.01%. What's up with that? Let's take a look and see. Apocalyptic Ingenuity is where I'll start off on the survivor side, with it being an incredibly cool perk, but unfortunately getting near to no love or usage. This perk lets you rebuild pallets, an effect that people were asking for literal years prior to getting this added, yet no one uses this perk. The core issue with this perk isn't even the effect though, but rather the activation requirement. To activate this perk, you need to first open or rummage through 2 chests, which initially sounds quite easy, but the problem with this is chests in general are just sort of a waste of time. Opening a chest takes 8 seconds, and finding one typically takes far longer, with there only being 3 chests at base in each trial. This makes it very hard to even get value out of this perk or charge it to begin with. Once it is charged, it then allows you to reconstruct a pallet, but the pallet is a fragile one, meaning it shatters unless it hits the killer. Even when it does hit the killer, it's still a shorter stun. This is not worth it, and so regardless of how cool and sought after the effect is, it's simply not worth it. To buff this, I think either it needs to be changed to opening 1 chest, or alternatively to not be a fragile pallet, but instead reconstruct a completely new pallet at the cost of 2 chests. People have wanted this perk effect for years, but this just isn't it, so it needs a change. All Shaking Thunder was a perk added with Houndmaster, which I do think led to it getting a bad rap, as the whole chapter did. This perk is interesting and very unique, with it activating upon falling from a great height, much like Balanced Landing. It then activates for 25 seconds, extending your lunge range by 75%, much like Coop. This perk on paper sounds quite useful and strong, however the main problem with this is that the activation just doesn't get triggered enough, and even when it does, the 25-second window is often just not enough to get value from. This perk is cool too, as it makes this pounding sound as you drop to the ground, literally shaking it. It's such a cool idea. To fix this, I do think it's hard if we're keeping it intact with its current version, as its main problem is just that maps don't have that many drop-downs, and some even have none aside the basement or a few hills. It's the same problem Balanced Landing has, to be honest. However, I do have an idea that I think can make this perk work. Tokens. If this were a token-based perk, it could instead start the trial with 2 tokens, say, being consumed when you do a lunge. These tokens would then be rechargeable by falling from a great height, but would be capped at 2 for this perk, as to stop you repeatedly dropping down from a height and getting like 900 tokens or something. I like this though because it would mean you naturally accumulate them during the trial, and also there's no time limit for their usage, making it far more useful than how it works currently. Rapid Response is an incredibly unique perk which acts as a sort of support to exhaustion perks. When you become exhausted, you see the killer's aura for 2 seconds. You can also opt to trigger exhausted yourself too by fast exiting a locker, triggering exhaustion for 20 seconds. So it's exhaustion support, but it's also sort of an information exhaustion perk, which is really unique, letting you get a ping on the killer's position, but at the cost of becoming exhausted, and also only seeing them for 2 seconds. I think the problem here is honestly the puny effect. 2 seconds is genuinely almost nearly nothing. What am I meant to do with 2 seconds? It can last longer than that, surely. Most of the time too, exhaustion perks are used in close proximity to the killer, and so 2 seconds of aura to see where they are just isn't helpful at all, most of the time. I think a simple fix here is a number adjustment, but I do think something more interesting could be done, because the idea of this perk is so cool. This perk also has an ambulance as its image, which doesn't really align with the current effect, so I want to suggest this becomes more of a team support perk. When within 24 meters of an exhausted teammate, press the active ability button to instantly take on their exhaustion. When exhausted, you reveal the killer's aura for 5 seconds. This would be a much better effect, I think, where you're able to actually directly help teammates mid-chase, removing their exhaustion, but it can also act as a support for your own exhaustion perk still, with the aura effect. Dominance is a rather interesting perk that came along with Dracula, with it having the effect of blocking off chests and totems with the entity's claws whenever a survivor touches one of these for the first time, doing so for 16 seconds. This perk is really cool, I think, and I like the idea of different objects getting blocked when they're interacted with for the first time. Despite it sounding like a pretty solid hex support perk, this perk really doesn't do much, and has a very low usage rate. The core problem with this, I think, is for one, the items it activates on just aren't useful as, say, generators. And two, there's simply better hex support perks like Undying or Thrill of the Hunt. Typically survivors will only interact with totems if there's a hex, otherwise there's little reason to. Therefore I think for this perk to be worthwhile, it needs to get an effect that applies to generators in some way. It needs to be broader. I think therefore this could activate on generators, totems, and chests, but instead only activate for 8 seconds. This means that for each item the survivors first interact with, they get an 8-second delay, and reveal their position somewhat, as you see the item's aura light up. It can make the perk work as a competitor to something like Lethal Pursuer, and also an early game delay perk like Corrupt Intervention. Invocation Treacherous Crows has got to be the worst perk in the game currently, with a truly terrible effect. This is probably the worst perk. Invocations as a whole though are an awesome idea, supposedly being perks with highly strong effects which must be riskily activated in the basement, taking 60 seconds to perform a ritual and subsequently breaking you for the rest of the trial. These are no small punishments, essentially, for using a perk. Therefore it must be good, right? Well, no. The effect it gives you for performing this ritual and becoming broken is that it will reveal the killer's aura to all survivors for 2 seconds, so a short time, but only whenever a survivor is in the killer's terror radius, and if they scare a crow. This is just so wildly pointless, and the activation of just 2 seconds is nothing. The thing is, if this did activate semi-frequently, it might be kind of useful, but it just doesn't. Most of the time when this activates, it's in chase with a survivor. This is pointless as the other survivors in game will know the vague position you're in due to the chase clause, and as the survivor being chased, it's highly unlikely that somehow the killer who's chasing you behind you is going to somehow scare a crow that you haven't already. This perk is only useful really if you're a survivor who runs Calm Spirit constantly, or something. It's just bizarre. I want to suggest something much more simple and effective while still keeping this perk intact. Once this perk is active, if the killer scares a crow, all survivors see their aura for 5 seconds. There we go, nice and simple, and provides survivors with genuinely strong tracking, monitoring killer position when no one has eyes on. And this aligns so much more with the perk name too, with the crows betraying the killer in favor of the survivors. Much better. Ravenous is shockingly barely used as a perk, despite it having the pretty strong sounding effect of a 60-second duration of exposed and making the survivors scream. This perk activating once you've hooked all 4 survivors for the first time. However, this is one of those perks where it sort of mistakes the exposed status as just being powerful by default, when this isn't really true, especially considering it's just 60 seconds, which isn't much. It'll often get you 1 down maybe, or 2 if the survivors badly misplay. The problem here too is that this isn't a cheap and easy activation like Hex Haunted Ground say. It takes a while to build up, and is inconsistent whilst it does it, and isn't even a guarantee. Some games you just don't really get into chase with all 4 survivors, even if you try to. So despite the cool idea of this perk and how it promotes positive play where you don't tunnel, it doesn't really work out that way a lot of the time, and certainly isn't rewarding enough for playing hard anti-tunnel and spreading hooks. This was the same problem Grim Embrace originally had, with it also originally requiring all 4 survivors to be hooked for the first time before it did anything really. Upon its rework, and now it's one of the best killer perks in the game. So I'd suggest a similar thing for this perk. Give it activations on the first 3 unique hooks as well as on all 4. To keep it themed with the idea of blood and also Crossu, I want to suggest that for the first 3 hooks, each time you reveal the other 3 survivors with Killer Instinct for 8 seconds. Then upon reaching all 4 stacks, you get 90 seconds of exposed, rather than 60. This would be a great perk then, I think. Come and Get Me is another Rick perk. This poor man can't catch a break. However, he does have awesome perk ideas. The idea behind this one being that you purposefully scream and draw attention to yourself to draw the killer's attention away from your teammates. Currently this has a really awkward way of doing this though. First you have to unhook a survivor, then crouch and be stationary, where you can then scream and mask the tracking elements of your team. I think this would be more fun and helpful if it just did this but to a greater extent, because currently screaming and revealing an aura for 5 seconds is often just ignored by the killer. The same goes for perks like Red Herring, where you try and draw the killer to a generator with a fake failed skill check. The problem is, sometimes the killer is just busy with other things and so they aren't going to care, especially if it's such a short duration. I think maybe maybe controversially, this perk needs to be more annoying, a perk which irritates the killer into chasing you over your teammates. This perk is meant to be attention drawing, so I'd like to see this keep the masking effects for your team, but to also cause you to scream repeatedly until the killer starts a chase with you, or you do a conspicuous action like working on a generator. I think this would be so much more effective having a survivor repeatedly screaming until they get attention basically, and I think starting a chase is hardly that bad to deactivate this. Controversial one, I'm sure that one though. That could be used by a lot of annoying people. Hex 2 Can Play has got to be one of the coolest ideas for a killer perk, with it blinding the survivors if the killer gets stunned too many times. That's so cool, and a great bit of revenge, and really fun when it works. You need to get stunned 2 times for this to activate, and upon this happening, any survivors who stun you afterwards now get blinded for 1.5 seconds, instantly applying a flashlight type effect onto their screens. This is a hex though, and I actually think that's why this doesn't get used very much. I also don't think it gets used very much because getting stunned doesn't happen that much either. Most people pre-drop. This means the perk doesn't activate much, it can get randomly broken at any point, and sometimes it won't even activate at all if the survivors mostly pre-drop or don't use beamers. That's the reason for this perk's fairly low pick rate, despite it being the perfect instant karma for bully squads or just aggressive survivors. It's too easy to counter, and its effect is also just 1.5 seconds, which is shorter than a killer stun, meaning the survivors still tend to get a head start either way. And if they're any good, having no vision for 1.5 seconds is not going to do anything to them. They're still going to navigate the map just fine. This may be a risky suggestion for a change, but I'd argue this maybe just needs to not be a hex. If a survivor blinds you, they get blinded too, although for a shorter duration of 1 second maybe. Then if they stun you with a pallet, maybe instead of them getting blinded, they could be hindered by 20% for 2 seconds, to imitate the equivalent of a pallet stun. That's the idea behind this perk, right, is revenge for actions done to you onto survivors. These effects would provide help and definitely repel survivors from flashlight blinds and pallet stuns, but also wouldn't make them so pointless to the point where it isn't worth doing them as a survivor, which I think is important too. And it's also why I don't like Lightborn, as a side note. I hate that Lightborn just fully negates the ability to blind the killer. I think that's kind of silly. I think if it made it 100% harder or something like that, it took twice as long, that's fine, but I don't like that it just completely negates the effect. I think that's really boring. Another hugely problematic set of perks are the teamwork perks. Teamwork perks being perks that activate via some sort of interaction with a teammate, typically a heal. The core idea, however, being that with some kind of interaction between 2 or more survivors, the team is buffed in some way. Perks that require teamwork, simply. These perks are just very bad due to their initial requirements for effect, but then they're even worse as for the majority of them you need to stay close by to the teammate who healed you, or vice versa, making them horribly impractical. The idea is cool though, and I think it's a shame how, despite it being a unique perk type, like a boon, none of the perks are that great really, with the standouts probably being the Stranger Things teamwork perks. The worst 2 I'd say are Teamwork Toughen Up and Teamwork Collective Stealth, both having similar stealth-based or evasion effects. Toughen Up makes it so whenever you're injured, if another survivor stuns or blinds the killer, then your grunts of pain, pools of blood, and scratch marks are masked for 30 seconds. This is a nice idea, but it's just so niche and specific, and only works if a teammate is actively protecting you. Even then, it doesn't do it very well. This perk is also entirely useless unless someone makes it work for you, which is odd. For a start, this perk would be better if you could also activate it on other people, as currently this is way too specific of a situation, and highly unlikely to happen as well, getting a teammate to get a stun or blind within 24 meters. Collective Stealth is a bit different, activating upon a survivor healing you. So long as you remain within 16 meters of one another, your scratch marks are suppressed, and that's it. It's really bad and very weak. I want to suggest maybe a hot rework for this one, which is to reuse a mechanic which only really has one effect currently in the game, which is Vecna's Eye. When using Vecna's Eye, you get the unique effect of invisibility. You're shrouded in this yellow glow and you're literally invisible to the killer. I'd love if this could be used elsewhere in the game, and specifically with these 2 teamwork stealth perks. For Toughen Up, I want to suggest that whenever you're injured and a teammate stuns or blinds the killer with you nearby, you become invisible for 16 seconds, letting you 100% get away unless you mess up somehow. Then for Collective Stealth, upon being healed and remaining within 16 meters of your teammate, you become invisible for the next 30 seconds, able to move freely wherever you please around the map. repositioning yourselves and aiding your team. This could be good, but I actually don't think too overpowered considering the short durations, and still rather niche activations and requirements. These two teamwork stealth-based perks are just so bad at the moment. They need something to make them stand out, as they are cool, but currently this just isn't it. Hoarder is a killer perk which I think has a really cool effect, and yet hasn't been changed since its release, and gets insanely low usage. This perk causes more chests to spawn in the trial, increasing them by 2, but you get the benefits of receiving notifications when a survivor opens a chest or drops an item within 64 meters of you. This one was even cooler upon its initial release, as it acted sort of as bait, as it spawned more chests, but the rarity of items in those chests was lowered. This was an awesome mechanic, but I believe for some reason it didn't work or clashed with something, so it had to be changed. This would be amazing if it could be reintroduced, because wow, what an interesting idea. I'm assuming it can't though, so I won't suggest this to be re-added. And whilst chests obviously aren't the best thing to have a perk centered around, I do think this is a really cool idea. I've had an idea for this for a while though, which I think is cool and also fits the perk super well. This will be that this perk not only adds chests, but also relocates them all to the basement, making it a dangerous idea to go down there. Then add an infinite range to the noise notification you get from chests being opened, making it so survivors can go down into the basement to recover lots of items, sort of like a killer's basement stockpile. But they have to risk potentially getting caught down there and being put in a bad spot. This could be such a cool little mini-game almost where survivors can take the risk, but it could also be a trap. Up the Ante is a cool perk with it increasing the luck of all survivors by 9% when everyone's alive. This is a cool and unique effect I think, because luck as a mechanic is quite rare nowadays, and there's only a few perks which even affect it. Therefore I think it's quite cool, but obviously this perk is a problem because this is all it does. The only effect is luck, and luck's only effect is increasing the odds of self-unhooking, which is a very niche action in itself and isn't worth doing largely, unless you're running a very specific anti-hook build. So this perk is a problem and very bad. But it's kind of more so that luck is a problem and is very bad. I think a fun rework to this would be to make it somewhat of a gamble and to potentially poach the D20 mechanic for it. When attempting to self-unhook, you flip a coin, giving you a 50-50 chance to unhook yourself. Landing on heads, say, it unhooks you, but tails causes you instantly to hit second stage. Then this perk can maybe be broadened out to also include other things like chests and totems. Flipping a coin on a chest either gives you a great item or notifies the killer. Doing it on a totem either instantly breaks it or makes you exposed for 15 seconds. Doing it on a gen either instantly completes it or instantly kills you. This perk could then have 3 uses to keep it somewhat in check if you get super lucky. I think this keeps the idea there, but spices it up a bit. Cruel Limits is our final killer perk for today, and one which will block off all window vaults when a generator is completed, for 30 seconds. This sounds like an amazing effect, yet it barely gets any usage, which is quite sad I think. Ultimately I think the problem here is that it's just too easy for a survivor to avoid the consequences of this. It's easy for them to just drop a pallet instead of vaulting a window, or to simply hold W a bit longer. Therefore the 30-second block is rarely useful. I could see just a slight change making this considerably better, which would be to also block upright pallets, stopping them too from being thrown. This still means you need a bit of luck to make this work, but it's a whole lot more likely to gain you value. Either that or just extending the window block to a much longer duration, like 60 seconds. I do think a full map lockdown though for 30 would be a lot more interesting, and also a scary moment for survivors, realizing what's happening. Alright, well that's gonna do it. I do hope you enjoyed, and be sure to drop your thoughts as always down below. Thanks, and goodbye.